another episode of Let's Talk Deer, brought to you by Grandpa Ray Outdoors, owned by Mr. John O'Brien. John's a Midwestern guy. He's around the Madison, Wisconsin area. He's been an agronomist for over 29 years. So he knows seed, he knows soil, and he knows what whitetail deer need. John has a large seed company, Grandpa Ray Outdoors, but also he's in educating. He's one of the best educators, seminar, platform speaker, communicator for soil, water, and cover. The soil brings the food, the water hydrates, and the cover keeps them safe. So that's what whitetail needs. So any questions at all about seed, go to grandparayoutdoors.com. Let's Talk Deer does receive compensation from Grandpa Ray Outdoors for mentioning him on my show. Hello, this is Bruce Hutchin with an old friend. Dan and I were talking. Dan Schmidt, Vice President and Editor of Deer and Deer Hunting. We're talking, and he was one of my first guests over 5 years ago on Whitetail Rendezvous. Now I'm the host of Let's Talk Deer. And Dan, it's welcome to have you back.
Thank you, Bruce. Appreciate you having me on today.
Yeah, and folks, we're going to talk about Wisconsin floated a survey, and we're going to talk about that. But just as we learned in our 30-minute segment or so on Facebook Live, we kind of went down some other trails, and that's okay because there's a lot of things facing us. And one of the things we want to share today and get out is the importance of the interconnection between wildlife and actually our health, because wildlife habitat, whitetails have good habitats, then all the surrounding critters, yes, a butterfly, yes, a caterpillar, yes, a skunk, yes, grouse, yes, everything else that's in that habitat, if it's thriving, everybody benefits. Well, guess what? It's the same thing in our world. So, Dan, let's talk about the Wisconsin survey and bring people up to speed and your thoughts.
Well, Bruce, that's a lot right there. We probably talked for a couple of days on, but in Wisconsin, which is the case in a lot of states in North America here, that we still have deer overabundance. Now, is it the same as it was 20 years ago? I'm going to argue no, it's not. But what's happened is what we know with deer is the whitetail is the most adaptable critter that we know of. Basically, the deer species has been around for, the whitetail species has been around for 20,000 years. They've learned to adapt. They've learned to thrive in environments that are probably not even ideal. So here in Wisconsin, we have ideal habitat, or did. And it's been decades of deer overabundance. With that overabundance, what we've seen is a degradation of forest, understory especially. Now, it's not 100% due to the whitetail, but it's a large percentage due to the whitetail and the fact that you have forests now, and it's the way they manage them, but forests with no understory, and when that understory is coming back, it's invasive species. That's overabundance of browsing. Preferred species are gone. Is the average person going to see it? No. The average person is going to walk through the woods and say, this woods looks perfectly fine to me. There's all sorts of brush around, but when you look at that brush, you see Japanese barberry, you see bush honeysuckle, you see buckthorn, you see all this stuff that's not supposed to be there. Would it still be there if deer were not around? Yes, probably. However, for us as deer hunters and deer enthusiasts, we like to see lots of deer. As we know through scientific research, those populations need to be held at a level, and that's something that the state has been mandated to do for their jobs for decades, and they have not been allowed to do it because they can't force you to shoot the deer. So, we talk about all things being equal, a healthy deer landscape should be approximately, now I'm just going to throw this out there as an approximate, in very good habitat. Now I'm going to preface it even more. When I say that everybody thinks that their land is the best, it doesn't matter. Now I'm talking Wisconsin. I don't care if you're over by Green Bay or if you're down by West Bend or if you're in Beloit or if you're in La Crosse or if you're in Ashland. Everybody thinks where they hunt is special, which it is. It's special for hunting, but the habitats are completely different. Now, if you get into the central farmland where I live, we really should only have 30 deer per square mile here. It's been upwards of 100 and more in many years. So what happens when you have a deer population that's 3 times what it should be? It's exactly what you get is you get overbrowsing. It degrades the habitat for other species. And that's now when I talk about that, it's not just food production of that habitat. The biggest thing, which is a very complicated matter, it's fawning habitat for white-tailed does. So if you don't have good fawning cover, if you don't have good overwinter cover, especially in the northern areas where deer previously would have, I don't know if you just lost me or not.
No, Dan, I just muted. You're breaking up again. Mute your video. Just go ahead and mute the video.
Mute. Okay, try that.
No, you muted the microphone.
Okay, I can't see. What am I supposed to hit here, Bruce?
Just the camera, the icon that looks like a camera, to the right, to the left of the microphone.
Okay, I'll try that. Got it.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, let's see if that works, because you're starting to fade out.
Okay. Do you want me to start all over again, or?
No, just continue on. That's okay.
Okay. So when I'm talking about habitat, it's not just about food production. It's also about fawning cover. It's about overwinter cover. And these things are very complicated because not only with trying to manage that cover, what we've had over the past decades, several decades, is you've got, human development. So you have other things going on. But so what do we need to do? For us as hunters, we basically need to listen to our trained biologists and do what they tell us to do. And everybody doesn't work together, it's not going to happen. And that's what we've seen. So now what I'm saying is if you own 40 acres and you have 3 guys hunting it and you get 6 free doe tags between the 3 of you, my God, no, you cannot go out and kill 6 does and expect to see deer next year. Everybody needs to do their part. So it's a team effort. In the fact that if we keep the deer population down, it's going to help the habitat. If we have healthy habitat, it's going to allow for the flourishing of other animal species, which builds what we call the ecosystem, and that's going to make a healthy ecosystem, what's going to make better hunting in the long run for all of us. And it's not an easy thing to understand. You can't put your finger on one thing and say this is the magic thing that's going to fix everything because I shot X amount of deer. It's all these things combined. So what I would suggest, and what Bruce you have mentioned, is educate yourself. It's no different than watching the news today with coronavirus. It's like when you see that story, was it from a reputable source? Same thing with this stuff. Educate yourself as to how the systems work. And I know a lot of people don't even need to do that because they are already up on it. But at the same time, have an open mind and don't have too many gut reactions to when you have some of these ideas get floated out, like a 19-day gun season. That might just drive you through the roof saying, oh my gosh, you're going to kill every deer. No, there's probably a reason for that. But now, should you believe everything you see out there? No. There's other things out there that are being driven by special interest groups. So it is a very dicey waters, I guess, to navigate into finding out which ones are actually beneficial and which ones are actually being driven by special interest groups.
Let's stay right there on special interest groups because I'm disabled. I have throughout the United States, I have permits, lifelong permits, to shoot a crossbow during archery seasons, even in states that don't allow crossbow hunting during archery seasons. And I read in the survey, the Wisconsin survey, that there was some chatter about changing, eliminating, having a crossbow only season and so forth. So I want your input on that because this is part of my education process of, hey, is somebody just raising a red herring on this and saying, hey, we don't want this, or is the DNR saying, hey, we're going to change it because we have data that supports.
Yeah, that one right there, specifically here in Wisconsin, is being driven by a special interest group of bow hunters, of compound bow hunters. I don't like to call them traditional bow hunters because they're not. I mean, there might be some a traditional bow hunter's guy who's using a recurve. Guys who I suppose we say vertical bows. Guys who are shooting vertical bows are pushing that idea of let's get the crossbow hunters out of the month of September. Let's get them out of the rut and basically pigeonhole those guys to hunting in October for the most part, and then being able to hunt during gun season with the crossbow if they want to, and maybe some of those later seasons in December. This is not by the DNR. There is no data that supports keeping crossbow hunters out of the regular archery season. And I'll go toe-to-toe with anybody who wants to sit there and cherry-pick any information they want. I'll cherry-pick my own information, and we can have a fun old time with that. But if you look at Wisconsin's, when I say archery harvest, and that's all things, that's crossbows, that's compound bows, and that's recurves. And I have never shot a deer with a recurve. I've shot more than almost 200 of them with a compound. I've shot a lot of them with a crossbow already. I'm talking about all bow hunters, but to keep them out of September is, in my opinion, is not warranted. I'm going to call it a crime because it's the people who are starting to take up crossbow hunters, crossbow hunting are the hunters that we need. They're people who it's a cross section everywhere. It's new hunters, it's young hunters, it's women, it's children, it's adult onset hunters. I know a lot of guys who are 30 years old who have never deer hunted before, lived in Los Angeles, come out here and saying, yeah, I would like to live this living ready lifestyle that we call it, like get my own food, know where my food comes from. I want to take up hunting. I would like to go bow hunting, but you know what? I'm not that proficient with the compound bow. You know what? I'm going to teach you how to use a crossbow, and you get to go this year. You don't have to wait anymore, because if you wait, you might lose them. And we find that with kids, and that's why they've lowered the hunting ages across the board. Especially here in Wisconsin, we've seen it. It was lowered to 10, so now it's where it's like, you know, if your kid is showing interest in hunting, they can go hunting, and I can take them out now in September with a crossbow and teach them, and they can have fun and enjoy it. My personal best memory of the crossbow is my own dad. Now, he got a permit because of a handicap. He deer hunted his whole life as a gun hunter. In 1999, he was diagnosed with colorectal cancer. He had his entire system taken away. He had a colostomy bag since then. And he said, I never got to bow hunt in my life. And he never thought he was going to. Well, the very next fall, that summer, we got him a crossbow. He got that then you had to have a doctor's permit. And he's enjoyed September bow hunting. He just turned 85 here a couple weeks ago. And I've never seen him have so much fun. Now, some people will say, yeah, well, that's an exception, because I don't think it should be an exception. I think if somebody is showing that interest, that is a benefit to the hunting community. And also, there is no data to support that it is doing anything to the population dynamics of our whitetail herd. We've seen it. You mentioned it before. I think you said is it St. Croix County? I can't remember the name of the county.
Yeah, St. Croix County.
St. Croix County, their advisory committee is basically proposing an antlerless only season for all hunters this year because they have too many deer. So that's a case right there. It's like, why in the world would I sit there and say, well, you can't hunt with a crossbow now? I mean, it makes no sense. Crossbows belong in the archery season. They're not doing anything. And short answer to your question is that is 100% driven by special interest, not by the state. The state's job is to manage the deer herd. Yeah, they try to balance it, but there's other things that they're trying to do that they should be able to do to help manage the deer herd.
My 2 cents is, folks, if you're listening to this, stop it, because we're all in this together. We need to recruit, retrain, retain, and reactivate hunters, because we're losing hunters. And the more on social media and the more people, get up in arms, and especially in this situation, the more you fracture and deter people. It's okay around the campsite to have the Ford and Chevy or the 30-06 versus the 30-30 discussions, because that's part of it. But when you come out and rally the troops and say, no, we don't want that, well, I'm going to go right to my new podcast, Ask the People podcast, and that's the Bill of Right. I have a right to pursue those things I want to pursue as long as they're lawful and legal. That's my right as a citizen of the United States. So given that, who gives you the right to say, no, I don't want you hunting with a crossbow when there's no quantifiable, quantitative evidence that says it's detriment to the Wisconsin deer herd, period.
100% agree with you, Bruce. And one thing I'm going to add that you said there, which a lot of people miss, you said recruit, retain, and educate, I believe. We put a lot of emphasis on recruitment. Yes, it's important. Yes, it's vital to the future generations of deer hunters. But I'm going to argue that one of the most important things for the here and now and for the next, when you say, tell me your 5-year plan or your 10-year plan. My 5-year plan is to retain as many hunters as possible. And if you look at the statistics and the data that we have, not only in Wisconsin, but in the United States, this is how it used to go. When you were talking about the 1970s and 80s and 90s, it was a very predictable curve for hunters. And basically they would come in at, 10, 12 years old. That curve's going to go up and you're going to have a nice leveling of the chart at ages, 20 to 40. And then you would see a slowly gradual decline as to when people got out of hunting. Today, what you're seeing is the retention of hunters is dramatically spiked for hunters 50 years old and older. And what's happened there is some of these things, like more generous seasons, not only bag limits, but you can use a crossbow now, you can use an inline muzzleloader now. It's allowed a lot of guys that are 50 years old and older to hang on. I use my dad as an example. He's 85 years old, and he shot a deer with his crossbow every single year for the past 20 years. That wouldn't have happened had he not been able to use a crossbow. So when you take those guys out of the mix, there is, on the back end of it today in 2020, when you look at the numbers, the sheer numbers of hunters in those younger age brackets, they're not there. There's hunters there, but they're not to the level that they were, that we grew up with and we know. So what's going to be, there's going to be a day of reckoning here in the next 20 years where we're going to see dramatic decrease in hunters no matter what we do, because the people that are coming into the sport are not enough to replace or replenish those that are going to be leaving the sport here in the next 20 years. So that's an important thing. Retention is key, is every bit as key as recruitment, in my opinion.
A good friend, Meadow Caulfield in Minnesota, she's the chair of the 3R committee for the state of Minnesota, and she speaks to it to women, and women are the fastest growing demographic in the outdoor industry for a lot of reasons. Outdoor industry includes hiking, biking, canoeing, fly fishing, hunting, but women in the outdoors. And she has told me time and time again, it says, we're just not making it easy for people to understand why we hunt. And that comes to the point in adult onset hunters, and we're going to see an increase of that because people are going to say, I'm hungry, I can't pay my bills, and squirrel season, rabbit season, deer season, whatever season, I believe this fall we're going to see a huge increase in license sales because people are going to be behind on the bills no matter what happens in the next month or so. We're going to be back on our heels, and people who live where they have access to public lands or private lands are going to say, I'm going to go out and get some protein. What's the best way to do that? Well, the quietest way, right in suburbia, and kill the deer in the backyard, is with a bow. Legal or not, you can wrestle with that. But there's going to be a lot of people, in my opinion, that are going to become these adult onset hunters for one purpose only, and that's field to plate.
Absolutely, and that is a huge movement now. And it's not just hunting; it's everything. My wife and I, we basically we do everything. We can our own vegetables. We we cook everything that we eat here, and that is it's a very satisfying thing for us. It's because we've done it. I've done it my whole life. I helped. She's gardened her whole life, but she caught onto the venison thing after she met me. But in America, not only to preach the healthy venison that you're procuring yourself, not only venison but everything, rabbits, squirrels, fish, whatever. That lifestyle is what is going to help hunting in the long run, and that's where we're seeing a lot of these people who are taking up hunting now. They don't care about antlers. They don't care about planting food plots, and we have fun doing that. But they're looking at us like, well, I can go out and shoot a deer and get 80 pounds of pure venison. Yeah, tell me how to do that for a resident tag of $20 or whatever it happens to be. It's helping us, and it's a public service. It's a public service that you're helping reduce deer populations. It's win-win all the way across the board.
Thanks for that. I appreciate that. And when we're on Facebook Live, we started talking and thinking about how the stump sitters became a goal in your life. And I'm going back to an interview 5 years ago, folks, and I mentioned this on Facebook Live to Dan, and I wanted to bring that out, sort of some positivity in this podcast to show you how one man at a young age became the vice president and editor of Deer and Deer Hunting. Take it away, Dan.
Okay, well, I think I tell this story so many times that people probably get sick of it, but so if you've heard it, tune me out for the next minute. But this started for me in 1981, and it wasn't super conscious effort because I did not remember it for several years after that. But in 1981, I was in 8th grade, and I was about to graduate from 8th grade, and that's what they did back then because I went to a parochial grade school. It was called St. Hubert's Elementary, which is in Hubertus, Wisconsin, which is down by Menominee Falls, Germantown, just outside of Milwaukee. It's no longer a school. It's called St. Gabriel's. They built a new big church later. But in April of that year, our teacher asked us to write a theme paper as to what we wanted to do when we grew up. And mine was I wanted to become the editor of Deer and Deer Hunting magazine. In 1981, as you know, Deer and Deer Hunting was only 4 years old, but it was started just up the road 100 miles from our house up by Appleton, Wisconsin, by the stump sitters. And even then I was 13 years old, I guess, I don't know, 14 years old. And I really respected what those guys were doing because we couldn't get enough of it. They were teaching us stuff about whitetails that we had never known about. Well, I worked construction with my dad, and that wasn't for me. There's no knock on it. It's just that it's not what I wanted to do for a living. So I figured out a way to go to college. I went to at that time there were 2 accredited journalism programs in Wisconsin, Madison and UW Wisconsin Oshkosh. I went to Oshkosh, got my journalism degree there, worked in newspapers for 4 years and covered everything. I covered murder scenes. I covered robberies. I covered sanitary district meetings, school board meetings, high school football games. I learned the trade in a very fast fashion. And then I tried and applied 3 times for the associate editor, which is the low man on the totem pole job at Deer and Deer Hunting. I was beaten out all 3 times. I went back to work. I started an outdoor column in southeastern Wisconsin. It ran in 14 weekly newspapers. It was called Peace of Mind, P-E-A-C-E, Peace of Mind, and it was an outdoor column I wrote. I won a Wisconsin Newspaper Association Award for that. I learned that I really needed to buckle down and really put my nose to the grindstone. Finally, I took a job at Krause Publications. It was with Blade magazine, knife collecting magazine, just to get my foot in the door because they had just acquired this magazine called, guess what, Deer and Deer Hunting. And within 5 months, I became the associate editor finally and worked my way up. I was associate editor associate editor, managing editor, became editor-in-chief in 2001. And we went through 2 corporate takeovers, or, as Krause Publications and F&W Publications. And then finally, F&W was a big New York based conglomeration. Yeah, just very many publications. I couldn't even name them all. Many different communities. And deer and deer hunting was always viable, but it was a very small part of that portfolio. And when F&W filed Chapter 11 here, it was, it all came to fruition came to a head last year. Brad Rux, who has actually worked at Deer and Deer Hunting longer than I have, he's been the ad manager and then publisher for many years. Brad started about 2 years before I did at Deer and Deer Hunting. Brad and we've worked together for such a long time. We have a great relationship. He knows the advertising end of things, marketing and management of the business very well. And Steve Bartilla, who has been a longtime contributor for us. Steve, he also he works on our TV shows. He has his own videos. I'm sure you've seen him, Grow 'em Big and Hunt 'em Big, extremely popular videos on social media and YouTube. The 3 of us said, let's put our forces together and figure this out. We secured a couple of silent partners and got it. And now that was last July. It was July 15th of last year in 2019. And then as of right now, we are sitting in a better position than we've been in a long time. Traffic on all of our digital properties is through the roof. Our website is going crazy, deeranddeerhunting.com. Magazine circulation is up, and our 3 television shows are thriving. Those are all on Pursuit Channel. So we have Deer and Deer Hunting TV, Land of Whitetail TV, and we used to have Destination Whitetail TV, but now we've replaced that show this year with a show called Deer Tech, which, if anybody has watched that show called How It's Made, that's going to be the how it's made of the hunting industry. Basically show you all what goes into products and what makes them cool and how they're using innovation and technology these days to make hunting more enjoyable. So in a nutshell, that's it. It sounds like I just fell into this. I didn't. I worked really hard. I worked many jobs in my life, and some not so glamorous ones, to get through college. And I always tell, especially students, there's nothing you can't do. And just because you get turned down once, you basically pick yourself up. I had to pick myself up 3 times. And that was just to get my foot in the door. And then I had to pick myself up many times over the past 25 years to stay in this position, because life just there isn't a conclusion. There's not like, well, I've made it. Now I can sit down and, no, as we're talking right now, I'm working on the next issue of the magazine, which is the summer issue of magazine. I don't just get to sit back and tell people what to do. You get anything out of life, what you put into it. And if there's anything, a take-home message there, that's what I would say.
How can people, listeners, subscribe to Deer and Deer Hunting?
Thank you. You just go to deeranddeerhunting.com, spell it out, deeranddeerhunting.com. You can get the magazine, you can get it print, mailed to you, you can get it digital. There's many different options there. And the other thing I'd like to mention is our company, which is called Media 360. We're based out of Media 360 LLC, based out of Waupaca, Wisconsin. We also publish Turkey and Turkey Hunting magazine, which is an annual. We do Trapper and Predator Caller magazine, which is a subscription magazine. We have an ice fishing title. We have a lot of different things. So if you go to deeranddeerhunting.com, there's links there where you can find if you're a trapper, or if you like to ice fish, or if you like to turkey hunt. There's some other things there that I think you would enjoy.
This is Bruce Hutchin with a special message about my relationship with Burner.com. Burner HD is a non-lethal pistol that's available now on the web at Burner.com. If you go to the web and use my promo code LTD2020, you're going to get a 10% discount on all Burner product. So again, Let's Talk Deer has a discount, promo code LTD2020 for all Burner product. Go check them out. They're great. Let's get back to the Wisconsin survey. And one thing I saw, I'm going a 19-day season. I don't know if I'm really excited about that because will that go into the rut? Am I hunting bucks with my crossbow or my rifle? How's that all going to work and what's the impact?
Yeah, 19-day season. That's interesting you bring that up, Bruce. Something about that, the history there is that idea is more than 30 years old. And they tried to implement that way back in the early 90s, basically based off of the fact that the biologists then, they saw this coming. They knew we were going to be sitting where we are today with deer management. And the fact that the gun season for almost every state is the big hammer for deer management, meaning that they use gun season to do most of the work as far as population control. In a 19-day prolonged season, the idea there is to spread out the pressure, hence make the deer not as nocturnal, and hopefully lead to slightly better harvest success ratios across the board. Now, can you look to specific ones and say, oh, if you take it, extrapolate across an entire state, the percentage is the thinking process there is going to be higher, and it's actually going to lead to less conflicts in the woods and things like that. That was the idea 30 years ago. We've seen this implemented successfully in many other states. The southern states, especially, you look at their gun seasons, they're long, prolonged seasons. In Texas, used to be basically deer season, and that's something that I'm a big proponent of, is that I would like to see. It's not going to happen. It'd be me just talking. If I could just wave a magic wand and say what would be the best cure, I would say in Wisconsin in particular, I would like to see them say deer season is, let's just pick some dates, September 17th through December 31st or January 31st or whatever it happens to be, and you can use whatever you want. But basically, here's the deal: you get 2 buck tags, you get X amount of doe tags. Now you can fine tune that if you wanted. You could say you can get 2 buck tags, but you can only kill one with a gun if you want. I don't think that's necessary. I think that if you did that, if you made a generic season, it's going to it's going to lessen the pressure across the board, because the stress factor on the hunter is gone. I mean, maybe for the first couple of years, guys are going to think, oh, I got to get out there September 17th. That's the whole thinking here with the 19-day gun season. Right now, okay, we start that Saturday before Thanksgiving. And the pressure on people right now is, if I'm not there Saturday and Sunday, especially in the central farmland, and even up north, if I'm not there Saturday and Sunday, I can just forget about shooting a buck because I'm not going to see one. That's how it used to be really bad, like in the 90s and early 2000s. Today, I actually see pockets where it's not that bad as far as the pressure goes. But if you extend that season to 19 days, it's going to allow guys to say, you know what, there's no rush to get out there. I can go out, the Saturday after Thanksgiving. I can go out there December 1st. I can go out whenever I want. And that's going to eliminate some of these other things like, special muzzleloader season. And if I could just expand on that, that's why the failure to get people to adopt a longer gun season 30 years ago led to what we see today with, okay, I have a 3-day, some of the things, if you've hunted the last 25 years, there was a 3-day October antlerless hunt. There was a special youth season. There was a special, week-long muzzleloader season. There's a special holiday hunt. They added all these things in there after the fact because they needed the people that we're paying, our employees, by the way, our biologists who report to us, the taxpayers, their job is to manage the deer herd. And I'm like, listen, dude, if you want me to manage your deer herd, you got to give me some tools here. I need some arrows in my quiver to do it. And those were creative ways to get around it, to basically provide more opportunity to hunters to go out there and harvest deer. I've heard all the arguments. I heard people saying, well, I can't hunt 19 days. I don't know about you, but I don't get 19 days off to go gun hunting. Nobody's telling you have to hunt 19 days. If you take the jealousy factor out of that comment, like, well, I can't do it, therefore nobody else should do it. Basically, what we see is, I think that's where a lot of it is rooted. I don't know how to put my finger on it otherwise. Is jealousy, and the fact that people think like, oh, my neighbor's going to kill all the deer before I do, or they're going to kill more than their fair share. It's not going to happen, because we've seen it happen with what we were talking about for the bow season with crossbow hunters. A lot of jealousy there, jealousy among vertical bow hunters, thinking that these crossbow hunters are killing those bucks before they get a chance at them. Well, maybe in a couple of individual cases that might happen, but I don't know. I grew up as a Catholic Christian, and if my neighbor kills a buck, I'm going to be happy for him. But the biggest thing for me is, from a deer management perspective, is that we have to give our managers tools to do their job. And if we don't do that, we can't expect any other result. If we're saying, oh, well, we got to reduce deer populations, you can't sit there and point a gun at somebody's head and say, you have to kill deer. You basically, that's why you see X amount of doe tags that are given out. And that's another thing that's misunderstood, is if you look at that and you say, my gosh, they're giving out 5,000 doe tags for Wapaka County. Well, because we know through historical research and data that if you give out 5,000 tags, you're probably going to kill 2,500, or whatever the breakdown is. And that's why you see, let's say it with bear hunting. They give out 60,000 tags, or how many tags, 30,000 tags, or how many tags they give out, and the harvest is only the same thing with turkey hunting. Right now, there's 8,000 tags left over for 6 period. You can go out and buy a tag a day until your ears bleed, and you could have 30 turkey tags for 6 period. But guess what? You're not going to kill 30 turkeys, because you're just not going to get that opportunity. Same thing with deer. Long-winded way of saying that longer gun season might come as a shock, but if you sit down and you actually research the history behind why it's there, the reason why it's there is for extra opportunity for hunters across the state. I mean, and that's from Beloit up to Bayfield. It's going to take in the entire state, and is it going to result in a lot more deer being killed? No, not a lot. It's going to result in some, hopefully, and that's the whole point, is if you spread that across 72 counties that we have in here in Wisconsin, it's going to help them accomplish and do the job that they're being paid to do.
One question I'll just throw out. I hunt up by Birchwood, and I think it's Sawyer County. I could be wrong. And that farm got hit really hard by wolves and bears. And so it's a 500-acre farm. The person food plots and had, the consultant habitat managers come in, and we had pictures of 180 deer I'm going to say he's been up there 10 years. And then all of a sudden the deer went away because of predation. That's the only thing we could say. And it's starting to come back. So what do you say to the people who say, well, up north, we've really, reduce everything down because the deer aren't there. The deer just physically aren't there, as opposed to Sauk County where I hunt, Juneau County. My buddy saw 100 doe in the neighbor's field Sunday night. We got plenty of deer down there. So how do we balance all that out?
That's an excellent question, and that's one I'm near and dear to my heart, because I grew up hunting Bayfield, Ashley, and Price counties in that northern forest. And we're talking about Chequamegon National Forest, we're talking about Nicolay National Forest, and those types of environments. Night and day difference between what you're talking about there. Night and day difference between where I grew up hunting and then down here in Wapaka County, which is the cusp of the farmland where it starts getting out of the North Woods in the central farmland. Up there, their challenges are much more difficult. Anybody who says wolves are not a problem is sadly mistaken. Wolves are a problem, and that is not on the state. The state wants to manage the wolves, but the feds are the ones that have been preventing that from happening. And that goes back to the same judge in Madison who gave us all the trouble with the walleye situation back in the 1980s, is the same problem that we're having today with wolves. Our deal with the feds was a handful. Now, I'm totally drawing a blank. It's in one of my blogs that I just wrote. I believe was 250, if it might have been 350 wolves. That was our population, what it was supposed to be. Right now, the population, as everybody knows, is 10 times that. We have too many wolves up there. It's not on the state, it's on the feds. The state wants to manage that wolf population. The feds won't let it happen. And up there in those counties in particular, in the northern forest, I would strongly recommend against, I mean, very limited doe hunting. I know that's a hard pill to swallow for guys that like to eat venison, but it really depends upon where you hunt. Some cases that they can handle it. I know that there are some areas of the northern range where populations have rebounded, but they've had some bad winters in there that have affected things as well. And when you're talking about, it's apples and oranges, because when you're talking about deer densities up there, what's acceptable for the habitat is probably half of what's acceptable for the habitat here. To give you an example there, now back in the late 1980s, early 1990s, the density goals up there, I know in Bayfield County where I hunted, the density goals were 15 deer per square mile. That was goal. That was 15 deer for every 640 acres of habitat. And they never met, they didn't get to goal. Some years they had some peaks because they had some mild winters, and other years they were down in the single digits. Until you've hunted an area with single digit deer densities, you really don't appreciate it. I know a lot of guys have grown up in these years of abundance, and these years of abundance have been the past 30 years. And now we're seeing crashes. Now, the other part of that problem is in some areas where that habitat has been so eroded through overbrowsing or poor or no forest management, and that there's many different variables that come into there, whether it's state, whether it's federal, whether it's private land, how is it being managed. What you have is you have boom and bust situations, and what I mean by that is you can't return to boom because the habitat can't support it. And not just from a food standpoint, but from the two other equally important standpoints of fawning cover, which is extraordinarily important, and overwinter range, which is even more important. Up north, overwinter range that's in poor condition simply can't get the deer through the winter to the points where they should be. So what needs to be done is there are different methodologies that are being used there, but for the most part, the managers are basically looking at it and saying, okay, well, here's our harvest recommendations for these areas, and you're going to just see, on the surface, you're going to see fewer doe hunting opportunities. And in some cases, I don't think they've done it yet. I didn't get a chance to look through that whole report. You can correct me here, Bruce, but I don't think there is a county, or there might be a couple, that are only recommending buck hunting this year. There might be 2 or 3. I'm not sure. I didn't get that far into the details.
I don't know.
Yeah, so that's basically in a nutshell. It's just they can't. The margin of error isn't as great up there with population recommendations.
With the knowledge that you have, what do you think the future right now of hunting is, not only in Wisconsin, but of all the United States, if not North America?
Oh man, that's a loaded question and a good one at the same time. The future is good. We are facing some real challenges. Chronic wasting disease is something that's not going to go away. It's gonna plague us. Whether that turns into something more, I don't know. I don't think, because of the whitetail in our lifetime, I don't think you're going to see mass die-offs of deer from chronic wasting disease in most areas, simply because the whitetail is so prolific. And you can see that in the studies that are coming out of down west of Madison right now, where CWD has really taken a foothold. The populations are still there, basically because the whitetail is so prolific. And in Wyoming, it's got a foothold there. Now, you could see, I think, some negative future effects in some of those western states where the whitetails are living in segregated, almost segregated conditions like you see in Wyoming and Montana and Colorado and places like that. But the future of hunting in general, I think is good. I think to a point that you've made many times, and we've been preaching this for as long as I've been at deer and deer hunting, is that the emphasis, not just for us as hunters, but for us to portray to non-hunters, which is the majority in this country, is that as hunters, we need to portray the lifestyle. And what I mean by the lifestyle is that healthy meat acquisition lifestyle. Does that mean you have to be 100% meat hunter? No, but I would suggest to people that shun the 100% trophy hunting focus. If you like to manage big bucks, more power to you. I love to see them. I love to read about them. I love to feature them in the magazine. But the lifestyle of acquiring 100% pure protein sustenance from your deer and then managing your land, if you're lucky enough to have private land. I'm not. I own 5 acres. I hunt on other people's properties that give me permission. But to manage that better than what you found it. So are you helping manage the forest? Are you helping manage for other things, for other wildlife? Because when you manage for the wildlife as a whole, kind of like our media name, Media 360, think about it as, wildlife management 360. You're managing for everything. I don't think that we're going to see, I don't think there's any gloom or doom in our future that way. We're going to have challenges. We're going to see chronic wasting disease. We're going to see outbreaks of blue tongue and things like that in some of these places where they're experiencing, weather conditions like they've never had before, and deer are dying by mass die-offs. But I think that there are enough of us out there, total outdoors enthusiasts, that you see it with other species. Look at Ducks Unlimited. Look at the Wild Turkey Federation. There's some of these groups that have helped those species flourish. And Ducks Unlimited, how are they doing it? They're doing it 100% through habitat restoration, and I think you use those same principles in deer hunting, and it's going to be in fine shape. It's different than what we grew up. I specifically grew up just outside of Germantown, Wisconsin, which was all dairy farms back then. Well, dairy farms in Wisconsin are going by. When I was a kid, there was 60,000 of them. Today, there's less than 10,000. I think there's 6 or 7 or 8,000 dairy farms left in Wisconsin. So the landscape is different. How I hunt now compared to how I hunted when I was a kid is different. When I was a kid, I could go out the door and walk through wherever I wanted. Nobody ever said anything. Can't do that today. So that's changed. There's always change with everything that we do in life, but I don't think that will change. I think that our wildlife populations, especially our deer herds, I think are going to be fine and in good shape for many, many decades to come.
One thing you mentioned there, and I remember Brenda Valentine was one of my first guests on the show, and she said, Bruce, just remember that on all your hunts, it's your hunt and have fun. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how big my buck is, how small my buck is. And I was in Iowa and hunting with some great guys, had a great hunt. Everybody got a nice buck, mature buck. They were all 125 or better. And the largest buck was 196, and mine was, well, you could have seen it over my shoulder. It's 32. But the point is, there's a segment of the hunting community that it's all about the inches. How big's your buck? And you see this, and I hate it on social media. How come you shot that little buck? How come you shot that spike? How come? And it's like, stop. One, I wanted to shoot the buck. It was close to where I could get my truck or my ATV to it. It was just a perfect situation. The sun was setting on it, looked gorgeous, so I shot it. That's how I shot my Iowa buck. It wasn't the biggest buck on the farm. I knew that, but he had a 10-point frame, was perfect, 8-inch brow tines, and the sun was hitting him, and I said, bang! And it was my first muzzleloader, buck. And I shot him, and I was happy. Everybody is kind of looking at me, when I get back to camp, I said, "Oh man, I couldn't be happier with that." And I've got that buck in my office. That's the only buck I have in my office, and it's my hunt, and I'll be happy because he's a perfect buck. And in 4 or 5 years, 3 years, he would have been a Boone and Crockett buck.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter, folks. It doesn't matter.
Absolutely doesn't matter. And I've been preaching that for years now, just as like you have. To me, I've seen, well, you see it a lot on social media to the point where you I don't know if you get numb to it or if you stop replying to the haters, but I've tried to tune out the negativity, and just try to, in my position, to promote all deer hunting. And I don't care if you're 12 years old. I don't care if you're 50 years old or if you're 80 years old, if you're a man, if you're a woman, whatever, whether you've shot your first deer or whether you've shot your 200th deer. To me, it's an individual, private experience. And probably where we run into trouble is when we post our stuff on social media, because we get so excited, and it's not just here, it's everything else. It's everything in life. I mean, you post your kid's birthday, anything. There's going to be somebody there who wants to just sit there and rain on your parade, or they're unhappy in their life. So what apparently the subconscious thing is, if they make somebody else unhappy with a snide, nasty comment, that's somehow going to make them feel better, prop themselves up. What I would just tell anybody listening to this is ignore it. And the other thing is hunt for yourself. Do not hunt for anybody else. When you start trying to hunt to please other people, even if it's just in their minds. I see this with social media kids, and I say that term kiddingly. If you're 25, in my eyes, you're a kid. Is everybody is so desperate for being accepted these days that they have depression, that they have anxiety, that they have self-doubt, and that we do it. Dopamine's a powerful thing. You put up a photo and you want people to like that photo. You want people to say, hey, good job on that buck. You don't want some idiot coming on there saying, oh, why'd you shoot that 2-year-old? I would like to reach through the screen and punch the guy in the face. And I'd say that metaphorically, but say congratulations. Be a good Christian about this. You don't know what that person's been through. You don't know if that person's battling cancer, or if their father's battling cancer, or if they had a bad day, or what. It doesn't matter. It does not matter. And if it's a spike or a fork or whatever, don't say something stupid like, oh yeah, well, that's a good first buck. No, it's a good 300th buck. They shot a buck. They were excited about it. The other thing I see, and to get on my soapbox here, Bruce, is I see people say, well, the only reason I say that is they start saying, well, it's not the biggest buck in the world, but I shot him anyways. The reason why they say that is because they're afraid of not being accepted. They're afraid of, if they can somehow couch it to lessen the blow that somebody's going to give them, and I would plead and urge people not to do that. Shoot it, own it, and be happy. And no apologies needed. None whatsoever. Own the happiness, and whoever's viewing that, if you don't like it, don't like it, don't click on it, but just don't say anything nasty. I think what we need to do is we need more positive people, and we need more positive experiences.
Well said, Dan. And with that, we're going to wrap up this episode of Let's Talk Deer, hosted by Bruce Hutchin. And today's our guest has been Dan Schmidt, who is now the vice president and continuing editor-in-chief of Deer and Deer Hunting magazine. Dan, if somebody wants to reach out and get a hold of you, what's the best way to do it?
deeranddeerhunting.com, spell it out, deeranddeerhunting.com. Check us out on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Pinterest, Instagram. Whatever you've got on your phone, you can find us there, Deer and Deer Hunting. Thank you, Bruce, very much.